Brad Pitt arrived at the studio that evening with a calm demeanor and a quiet smile. The backstage crew greeted him warmly as usual, unaware of the brewing storm that would soon take center stage. The green room was stocked with his favorite snacks and a crisp tailored suit hung on the rack, ready for the spotlight. Jimmy Kimmel's team had booked him to promote his latest film, but there was tension in the air that no one could quite explain. A producer handed Brad a rundown of the show, and he gave it a quick glance before setting it down on the coffee table, his jaw tightening just slightly. Jimmy Kimmel, in his dressing room, was finishing final touch-ups while chatting with his head writer about the skit that had been planned for the Guess It segment. He smirked as he read the cue cards, which included a few jabs at Brad's recent tabloid controversies. The jokes, while clever, leaned sharply toward the personal. Jimmy liked to push boundaries with his humor, but this time he might have misjudged his target. As the countdown to the show began, he adjusted his tie and made his way to the stage, unaware that Brad had already seen one of the cue cards accidentally left behind in the hallway. The opening monologue went as expected, sharp, fast-paced, and filled with the usual mix of political satire and celebrity gossip. Jimmy's energy was high, the audience was engaged, and everything seemed in rhythm. But behind the curtain, Brad stood stone still, staring at the floor, replaying a line he had read. Brad's idea of parenting is letting the kids pick their own last name. It stung more than he'd admit. He inhaled deeply, trying to stay calm. A production assistant tapped his shoulder and signaled that he'd be on in 2 minutes. Brad nodded slowly and walked toward the stage entrance. The curtain lifted and applause thundered as Brad walked out with his signature effortless charm. He waved to the crowd and shook Jimmy's hand with a firm grip that lingered half a beat too long. The two exchanged pleasantries, but the undercurrent was obvious to anyone watching closely. Jimmy smiled wide, but Brad's jaw was clenched, his responses tight. Jimmy moved into the scripted jokes, starting light and slowly edging into more personal territory. Brad laughed politely at first, but the glint in his eye said he was keeping score. When Jimmy brought up the custody battles, Brad's expression shifted. "Really, Jimmy?" Brad said, forcing a smile. "We're going there?" The audience laughed, unsure if it was part of the act. Jimmy chuckled and played it off, but Brad leaned forward, his voice lower now. "There's a line, man, you crossed it." The studio audience quieted slightly, sensing a shift in tone. Jimmy tried to pivot to a safer topic, but the tension wouldn't break. Brad wasn't letting it slide. "You think you can joke about my family on national television and I'll just smile through it?" Jimmy raised his eyebrows, surprised at how quickly the mood had turned. Producers behind the scenes scrambled. One whispered into the headset trying to redirect the segment, while another motioned for a possible commercial break. But on stage, the confrontation continued. Brad leaned back in his chair, his body language rigid but composed. Jimmy tried to lighten the mood with another joke, but Brad cut him off mid-sentence. "You don't get to throw punches dressed as punchlines," he said. The crowd was silent now, the laughter gone. Jimmy's smile faltered. He looked at the cameras, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut the feed. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable silences in late-night television history. Jimmy blinked and shifted in his seat, trying to find a way to recover. "Okay, maybe that one was too far," he said with a half-smile. Brad didn't respond immediately. He turned to the audience and said, "There's a difference between being funny and being cruel." The words hung heavy in the air. Jimmy's attempt to steer the interview back on track fell flat. He asked about the movie, but Brad only answered with curt phrases, offering no elaboration or charm. The control room decided to cut to a commercial, but not before capturing Brad's last sentence. "You brought me here to humiliate me. That's not comedy." As the screen faded to black, social media lit up with speculation. Backstage, chaos erupted. PR teams and producers debated what to do next. Brad stood from his chair before the crew had even gone off air. He walked briskly backstage, his team following behind. Jimmy sat at his desk, hands folded, staring blankly ahead. He looked more confused than angry, as if he hadn't expected his jokes to hit this hard. Brad's team tried to convince him to return for the rest of the show, but he refused. "This isn't what I signed up for," He said, "I came to talk about the film, not to be the punchline." He changed out of the suit into jeans and a hoodie, removed his mic, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Studio security trailed behind out of protocol, though there was no need. Brad wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening anyone. He just wanted to leave. Outside, a swarm of paparazzi waited, cameras flashing like fireworks in the night. Jimmy tried to recover in the second half of the show, joking about how Brad Pitt just walked out of here like he walked out of Troy very dramatically. The audience gave a nervous chuckle, but the mood was off. Even the house band seemed uncertain. Jimmy took more questions from the crowd to fill time, but the energy never returned. By the final segment, the closing applause was half-hearted. As the credits rolled, Jimmy leaned back and muttered to his producer, "Well, that's gonna trend by morning." He wasn't wrong. By sunrise, every major outlet had a version of the story. Brad Pitt walks off Kimmel. Kimmel's joke too far. Hollywood clash on late night. Video clips spread fast. Reactions were split. Some called Brad Pitt skinned. Others applauded him for standing up for his family. A few fellow actors even commented, some showing support, others staying neutral. Kimmel's team released a short statement saying they regretted any offense caused and hoped to move forward amicably. Brad's camp declined to comment further. Both sides were now trying to control the narrative, but it was out of their hands. In the days that followed, fan theories and behind-the-scenes leaks added fuel to the fire. A staff member anonymously told a gossip site that Brad had warned them before the show to avoid family topics. Another leak claimed Jimmy had insisted on keeping the jokes in for ratings. Whether true or not, the damage was done. Late-night shows are known for pushing limits, but this incident sparked a deeper debate. Was there still room for celebrity roasts, or had the culture shifted? Was it comedy, or cruelty disguised as satire? Brad went quiet for a week, then posted a brief message on social media. "Respect is not optional." It went viral. No hashtags, no elaboration, just those 4 words. Jimmy, meanwhile, made an awkward apology on the next episode, saying, "Sometimes comedians get it wrong. I got it wrong." Some applauded the humility, others saw it as damage control. Either way, it marked a rare moment of public accountability in a genre often protected by irony and punchlines. Ratings for both men soared temporarily, then normalized. But the tension lingered in the industry. Executives at the network began reevaluating their vetting process for guest segments. Writers were advised to avoid deeply personal material unless cleared beforehand. Some saw it as censorship, others as long overdue empathy. For Brad, the incident became part of his press cycle, but not in the way anyone planned. Interviews shifted from promoting his film to discussing boundaries in public discourse. He handled it gracefully, redirecting conversations toward dignity and respect. The movie, ironically, did well, some say partly because of the buzz. It became a symbol of grace under fire. Months later, Brad and Jimmy crossed paths again at an awards gala. They shook hands briefly, posed for a photo, and moved on. No words exchanged, no tension shone, just 2 professionals navigating the delicate line between humor and harm. The photo went viral, sparking fresh speculation, but both men stayed silent. The world moved on, but that night on Kimmel's show remained a turning point, not just for them, but for late-night TV as a whole. In a time of shifting boundaries and public scrutiny, it was a reminder, words matter, even when they're meant to make us laugh.